Welcome to another devlog for Towercraft, a roguelike tower defense game where you build the map and craft custom towers. In this video, I'll be covering days 8 to 10. In the previous devlog, which covered days 1 to 7, I started the project in Godot and got a solid amount of the foundation done for the game. I implemented features such as the camera rig, hex tile placement, and enemy spawning and pathfinding. Day 8 is when I wanted to finally start working on towers, which are a pretty important part of a tower defense. But first I figured I wanted to give goblins health, so the towers had something to deal damage to. I gave the goblins health, a health bar, and the ability to die, so now my future towers had something to kill. Now it's time to add towers, right? Wrong. I found something else to do first. The dev panel was looking awfully, well, non-existent. That isn't a panel, it's just some checkboxes on a screen, so I wanted to make one before doing anything else. I tried using Godot's built-in pop-up window, but it was having issues. So I just made my own using a panel. Also, I'm pretty sure this was the first issue I've had with Godot 4, so that's good, I think. With the dev panel finished, now is it time for towers? Yes. I started with the model, so you know what that means. Time for my favorite program. Nah, I'm just kidding. I made the tower out of basic primitives, directly in Godot. There was no need to make it in Blender since it's just going to be replaced anyway. The next step was to make it so when you hovered the center hex of a tower tile and then clicked, the tower spawns in. There were a few issues that I had to fix with this, such as spawning multiple towers on the same tile, or spawning a tower before the tile was placed. But all in all, it was pretty easy to add. Making the tower aim at the closest enemy, on the other hand, was not. After a ton of trial and error, I finally got it working using quaternions and slurp. I think it stands for spherical lerp, but I don't know. Anyway, it worked, but for a tower defense, smoothly approaching the target rotation isn't necessarily a good thing. It looks nice, but the slower aiming can be the difference between killing the enemy and losing the game. I started day 9 by giving towers some stats. The stats I gave each tower are damage, fire rate, range, projectile size, and aim speed. But currently these were just variables that didn't actually do anything. The first stat I wanted to implement was range, both making towers only shoot at enemies within range, as well as visualizing the range with some sort of circle. After wasting a bunch of time trying to get a nice ring effect, I opted for just a cylinder. It's not great, but it gets the job done. The next stat I wanted to implement was aim speed. And before I went about that, I needed to fix the issue with it. It worked, but because it was slurping, a low aim speed meant it would literally never reach enemies. All I wanted it to do was rotate at a constant rate until it was aiming at the target. This was easily done with the rotate Y function. The issue was knowing which way the tower should rotate. There was an angle to function, which gives the angle between two directions, but it wasn't signed, meaning I knew how far it needed to rotate, but not which direction. Fortunately, I was able to find a signed angle to implementation, and that did the trick. In order to implement damage, fire rate, and projectile size, I needed the tower to actually shoot something. I decided to make an arrow tower, so of course I needed an arrow model. So I made a beautiful handcrafted arrow out of only the finest primitives. It was easy to make the tower shoot the arrow and then to make the arrow travel forward. The hard part was the homing. Fortunately, I already solved this problem. I used almost the exact same code that the enemies use to smoothly turn around corners, and it worked perfectly. The arrow has a vision area, and the first enemy that enters it is the one that it turns towards, and the arrow just slowly turns towards that enemy's position while continuing to move forward. With the arrow shooting from the tower, it was extremely easy to make the fire rate, damage, and projectile size stats actually do something. After that, sounds were added, some bugs were fixed, and it ended up looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. Oh man, day 10 was a doozy. I started it by adding a tower edit menu for when you select a tower. In the short term, it'll be used to display and customize a tower's stats. And in the full game, this menu will be used to allow the player to equip items and enchantments, level the tower up, and view its stats. I added stat displays, and then I made it so changing the stat in the menu updated the stat in the tower. Finally, I made it so the camera zoomed in on the selected tower, and the selected tower's range display was permanently showing, as opposed to only showing when you hovered the tower. With the stats part of the menu finished, it was time for turrets. And when I say turrets, I mean the part of the tower that holds all of the artilleries that shoot things. I started with laying out all of the possible turret formations. In the prototype, I came up with a bunch, but they felt a bit all over the place. Seeing all the artillery positions at once allowed me to come up with a much better naming system, and even come up with some completely new formations. They're now separated into series, with multiple versions in each. The forward series have the artillery shooting forward. The multi-directional series have the artillery shooting in all directions. And the spread series have the artilleries aimed to the left and right. I added the drop-down in the edit menu that set a tower's turret type, and doing this would deactivate all artilleries that weren't a part of that type. For example, if the multi-directional version 1 turret type was selected, the forward and backward facing artilleries would stay, and all the other ones would deactivate. Although this definitely was not the best way to do it, it worked well. And then, for the last 4 hours of the stream, I attempted to get 4 towers with multi-directional V4 turrets and fire rates of 40 to run at 75 frames per second. I don't really know why I did this. I mean, I do, but suffice to say I did not succeed. And the lesson is to not optimize if you don't need to. The towers are never going to shoot this fast, so there's no point. That's it for devlog number 3. It's exciting to finally be working on the towers, and in the next devlog, I'll be making even more progress on them. Like and comment for the algorithm, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.